Okay. Good evening, and thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Barry Fink, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters of the Copper Country. League units all over the state of Michigan have been joining in this effort to help the citizens be aware of the work of the Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, and we are a part of that. The League is a grassroots, nonpartisan organization that doesn't support or oppose any candidate or party, but we do take positions on issues when we have studied those, and we do advocate for those positions. So we were a part of the work that brought us the opportunity now to have this redistricting commission. The members of our committee that are going to be talking to you tonight include Valorie Troche, Elizabeth Benye, and Liz Hakala. We're going to start off with some remarks from Steven Lett, who is one of the commissioners, and we're very happy to have him with us for the beginning of our meeting. And I'm going to now get his slides up so he can talk to us about his part of the program. Okay, everybody seeing this all right?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. I have done a number of these. In fact, I did one earlier at lunchtime with Grand Traverse League of Women Voters. So if you compare notes with them, you can see what I have forgotten. Next slide, please. In 2018, the voters passed Proposal 2, which amended the Michigan Constitution to place the redistricting of congressional, state senate, and state representative districts in the hands of an independent Citizens Redistricting Commission, which is now known as the MICRC, or Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. There are 13 of us who were selected randomly, and 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 4 independents, or 5 independents, excuse me. We are responsible to listen to the voters and the citizens of Michigan in coming up with a redistricting plan that has no input from the Democrats, the Republicans, or any other party. Next slide, please. Before we draft a plan, we are required to have 10 public hearings throughout the state of Michigan. We currently have scheduled 16 hearings, and if we listen to all of our emails, we would do 83 because every county wants one. That obviously is not possible. We're starting out on May the 11th in Jackson. We will be in Gaylord on May the 20th. The schedule and times and places are on our website, as is everything that we do is on our website in one form or another. Once we hold these meetings, the intent is to ensure fair and impartial maps that MICRC is required to draw pursuant to the public input. Next slide, please. The purpose of the public meetings is to inform the public about the redistricting process, share the purposes and responsibilities of the commission, and solicit information from the public about potential redistricting plans. The process of redistricting is to adhere to the constitutional amendment, which lists, oh, just lost my notes, which lists 7 things that we look at to start with. First and foremost is equal population. Pursuant to the Constitution and the Supreme Court decisions, equal population for congressional districts is mandated. In addition, we have to follow the Voting Rights Act and other federal and state laws. Second, the area should be contiguous the district should be contiguous, and that means that no more gerrymandering. Third, there should be a diverse population and communities of interest. This is what we'll be looking for on our public meetings. What is a community of interest? Well, the League of Women Voters, I have found out this afternoon at noon, has been looking and trying to solicit information for various communities of interest. As I like to use Detroit as an example. In Detroit, you have a large Arab American population that obviously is a community of interest. You have a large Jewish population, that's obviously a community of interest. You have a large African American population, obviously a community of interest. Those are the types of things that we're going to be looking for. It can be economic, it can be cultural, it can be religious, it can be any number of things. We are not to provide a disproportionate advantage to any political party. We are not to favor or disfavor an incumbent or elected official. We will reflect consideration of county, city, and township boundaries, which is very important to a number of counties, townships, cities, etc. We have certainly heard in my meetings that townships don't want to be divided between districts. And they must be reasonably compact. If it's an island, the island goes with the county of which the island is attached to start with, such as Beaver Island would be with Charlevoix County. Next slide, please. If we're asking you if your particular League of Women Voters has its own website, if you would post redistricting at michigan.gov, as well as michigan.gov/MICRC, so that people who might look at your website and want to know where we're at can go there. Those are both places which they can access our website and our information. They can also mail them to MICRC PO Box 30318, Lansing, Michigan 48909. We anticipate in our public meetings getting any number of proposed districts shown to us. As I said, you can present them in any number of ways. There are map drawing programs on the internet that can be accessed by anyone. You can use those to draw maps and districts. You can get a state of Michigan map from the Secretary of State and draw your own district on that map and send it to us. We'll take a look at it. So that's what we're up to. As you all know, everything we do is in the public domain. All of our meetings right now are virtual. The public meetings that we do, as well as being in person, will also be virtual. We will also have electronic transmission of those. We try to make it as easy as possible. We try to be as open and transparent as possible. I don't think there's anything that we have done to date that has not been recorded and posted on our website that anybody can go look at. as well as all the emails we get and any other correspondence that we get are also on there. If you want to know what we're doing, go take a look. It's all there. Be happy to take any questions or answer any inquiries if I can.
If you have a question and you'd like to enter your name in the chat, if you can't unmute yourself, I can try to get you on mute.
I have one question. First, thank you for what you're doing. I'm sure it's a big undertaking, and I would imagine you probably didn't understand what it was all about when you signed up for it. So thank you.
Had no clue.
I don't think anyone did. But my question is, I'm wondering, has it been resolved, the difficulty of when you are actually going to receive the census data versus what the Michigan Constitution requires deadlines? That there's some...
No, that has not been resolved. We recently, and by recently, filed a lawsuit in the Michigan Supreme Court today at 2:21, asking that the court grant us some relief from those dates that are in the amendment, because if the census numbers come out on September 30th, it is physically impossible for us to draw the maps and put them out to the public for their review for 45 days. That puts us past November 1st, which is our deadline. So we have filed a lawsuit. It's a petition for relief with the Supreme Court, which is where all of our cases go by amendment. By the amendment, we go to the Supreme Court. We'll see what they do. But what we will be doing in the meantime is there is information out there that we can use to work with in order to try and get as close as we can with the districts. One of the main alternative sources is the American Community Survey, which we will be using. Also, the Census Bureau is going to come out with some raw data that can be used in addition, as well as the state of Michigan has a section under, I believe it's the Bureau of Elections, and they keep pretty detailed information on populations, etc. So our ultimate game plan is to get as close as we can before September 30th, and then to make any necessary adjustments based upon the census numbers that come out on September 30th, and be able to put out our final map in a very short period of time.
Thanks.
I have a question. Will you be using the 2010 census as kind of a dry run?
No.
And what's the reason for that?
The figures are 10 years old, and we feel that we can obtain other figures that are much more current, such as the ones I mentioned.
Okay.
Hello. I want to commend your commission on the work you've been doing. I've been watching it on and off. It's kind of like watching soap opera without the histrionics, and so I really appreciate the way in which you treat each other, and the openness that you mentioned in your talk. That it is important that everything is above and beyond any question, and so I just want to let you know that I appreciate it. But I do have a couple of questions. One is, have you finished hiring all the personnel or agencies that you need in order to do the job. And I can't remember, there was this fellow by the name of Adelson who got some publicity because he made contributions to several people he knew who were in office. And if that was, I've forgotten if that was resolved or not.
We have made him an offer. I assume he will accept. He is what we call a VRA attorney, voting rights attorney. And there was some concern by persons that he had made a contribution to the Secretary of State's campaign. And I believe he testified, or he presented at our hearing when we interviewed him, that it was $150 2 or 3 years ago. And he said, I haven't made more than 3 or 4 donations to anybody prior to that. We did not count that as being a significant hindrance to hiring someone who has excellent credentials, who worked for both California and Arizona, who has worked for the Department of Justice in the voting rights area. The guy has impeccable credentials, and we hired him. As far as we're concerned, it's over.
Okay, so are you done hiring everyone or every agency you need at this point?
We are looking right now at some PR firms to help us in the various areas, get the word out, get people on board with where they can go to public meetings, if they have any questions, etc. We made an offer to a firm for the Southwest, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb County area. We'll probably make one over on the west side of the state. So those are other than those, but we have all the major players in place.
So once you've got the census data and have your mapping company put the districts together, is your work done at that point?
Oh no. No, once they do that, and once we do a proposed final map, then we will put that out to the public for a period of 45 days. And during that 45 days, we'll go back out on the road and have public meetings. 5 are required. We're going to do 6. And then once all of that's done, at the end of that 45-day period, we would then adopt that plan as our final plan and present it to the Secretary of State.
And she is the final voice.
No, we
outside of the people going to court.
We are the final voice outside of people going to court. Okay.
So that means if the lawsuits start coming up, your commission would be the one that would be defending the constitutional amendment. Is that correct?
Right. We would then be out hiring voting rights law firms to defend us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lett, for joining us. We are going to go on with the program now that the League has prepared, and Valory Troche will start us off for that.
Thank you. I appreciate your having us in, and if in the future you want to have us back, that would be fine. I will leave you all to your meeting. Thank you.
So this is Valory, and I am unmuted. Actually, we're going to start with Elizabeth Benye, and she will present the first part of the presentation this evening. So Elizabeth, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Valori. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I just want to state that the League of Women Voters in Michigan is nonpartisan and does not support or oppose any political parties or candidates. The League encourages informed and active citizens in government and works to increase understanding of policy issues through education. And that is why we are here today. This town hall will cover 3 related topics. The first topic will be redistricting and how gerrymandering affects redistricting. The second part or the second topic will be what Michigan voters did to get rid of gerrymandering. And then the final topic will be the new system for drawing the election district lines. Next slide, please. Next slide, Barry. So the lines for the Michigan U.S. Congressional, the Michigan State Senate, and the Michigan State House of Representatives are redrawn every 10 years after the national census has been completed. This is to reflect the changes in the population that have occurred. How these lines are drawn determines what voters will live in each of those 3 legislative districts. And in Michigan, we currently have 14 US congressional districts. We lost 1 after the last census. And we have 38 state Senate districts and 110 state House districts. Next slide, please. So what is redistricting? This follows the census, and the states are tasked with drawing the lines. Every state determines its own process, and there are very few rules that are available. Next slide, please. So how are the map lines drawn? Next slide. There are very few rules that are required to be met when you are drawing the lines. The US Constitution, Article 1, Section 2 requires that the seats for the US House of Representatives be apportioned to states according to the population counts from the national census that is conducted every 10 years. The only other really rule that applies is the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which blocks and prohibits district lines to deny minority voters an equal opportunity to participate in the political process and to be able to elect representatives of their choice. In 1964, Reynolds versus Sims, the Supreme Court determined that apportionment should be 1 person, 1 vote, and interprets that electoral districts must be equal in population according to the most recent census data. And then the final rule is based on the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which assures equal protection of each voter and each vote. These few rules do not specify the process that any state uses to do redistricting or how the lines are drawn. Next slide, please. So what is the problem? Well, prior to 2018, the problem was that the state legislature, the state of Michigan, had complete control of how to draw these district lines. This was done secretively. It was done with a lot of outside influence, and they basically gerrymandered maps to keep themselves and their party in power. Next slide. So what is gerrymandering? Simply put, it is a way of manipulating maps to keep your candidate reelected or to keep your party in power. This is a very small example of how gerrymandering occurs. If you pretend that the first box is the state of Michigan, where 40% of the voters are purple voters and 60% of the voters would be green voters. If you look at the second box and see how the districts are drawn, these are vertical lines. And what this shows is compact districts, meaning they're regularly shaped, all of them are fairly equal, and they are they are equal in population. And you end up with 2 purple candidates that are elected and 3 green candidates that are elected, which is fair, reflecting the population of that particular voting state. If you look at the third box, the lines are drawn horizontally. This gives compact districts, which is a good thing, but they are unfair because now the purple voters have absolutely no candidates that are elected, and green rules all of the districts. If you look at the final box, the districts are neither compact nor are they fair. And in fact, they are so irregularly shaped and gerrymandered that purple, which is the minority group, would rule all of the seats. Next slide, please. So to explain that last box in a little bit more detail, you can do 2 really bad things in gerrymandering to really dilute votes. The first box represents cracking. What they show here is that the minority groups are divided up so and diluted so much into districts that they have absolutely no chance of being able to select a representative of their choice. If you look at the second box, that's packing of voters. And if you notice, they took all the minority purple voters and packed them into one district. So they only get 1 representative of their choice elected, while green gets all of the remainder representatives elected. Next slide, please. This slide shows the Michigan congressional districts, and currently we have 14 districts. As stated before, we had lost a district with the last census. There are 435 members of Congress in total, and they are reallocated to the states again every 10 years. From the early 1900s through 1970, Michigan's population actually grew very rapidly, most likely because of the auto industry. And we grew from 12 congressional seats to 19. But since then, we've lost congressional seats, reflecting a decline in our population to where we are now currently only having 14 seats. We still are ranked 8th in the nation for the number of congressional seats. And we have approximately 710,000 voters in each of these congressional districts. These representatives serve 2-year terms and they have no term limits. Next slide, please. This is currently the 14th district, which is down in Southeast Michigan. And you can see that this is clearly a gerrymandered district. It's been packed, it's been cracked. And if you look where the Farmington Hills area is, they actually carved that out and moved it with other districts. This was to dilute the ability of minority voters in the entire region from being able to select more than 1 representative. It is neither compact nor of equal population. This is definite packing of the voters. This district is 79% Democratic and 80% non-white, and clearly gerrymandered by all standards. Next slide, please. This map is the 2012 map, similar to the 2012 map of the congressional districts, but this reflects the Michigan Senate districts, of which there are 38. And this has approximately 212 to 263 residents in each of these districts. These state senators are elected during the midterm elections and they serve 4-year terms. And they are term limited to 2 terms, meaning they can only serve a total of 8 years. Next slide. This map is the 2012 State House representatives of the Michigan State House, again, based on the 2010 census. This holds between 77,000 and 91,000 residents in each of the districts. And again, there are 110 state representatives. The circle, if you notice, shows a gerrymandered district in the Upper Peninsula, where the 110th district encroaches into the neighboring district, taking voters and territory from that district. These state representatives serve 2-year terms, and they are term limited to serving 3 terms, meaning they can only serve a total of 6 years. Now I would like to introduce Liz Hakala, who will discuss the next segment of the town hall, and I appreciate your attention.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next slide. The Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. In November of 2018, 61% of Michigan voters decided to end gerrymandering by approving Prop 2, an amendment to the Michigan Constitution that moved the power to draw the election district lines from legislatures and put it in the hands of voters. The amendment also created a body known as the Michigan Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission and set clear standards for how the lines should or should not be drawn. Next slide, please. The Constitution requires that the MICRC use a process to develop election maps that are transparent, impartial, and fair. And the MICRC conducts all business out in the open. All of the meetings are available on YouTube, both current and past meetings. And the commission consists, as Commissioner Lett told us too, that it consists of 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 independent or not affiliated with any either Democrats or Republicans, but and could be neither any party at all. And also, in the interest of fairness, the requirement is to draw the lines that are neither favorable or in favor or disfavors incumbents, any political party, or former politician. Next slide. I'll describe a little bit more about the commission structure. This illustrates how the commission is balanced with the 13 members, 4 Democrats, 5 independents or non-affiliated, and 4 Republicans. Next slide, please. The eligibility to serve on the MICRC commission is 2. A commissioner must be registered to vote and eligible to vote in the state and must submit an application. Next slide, please. The selection process. The goal was to have a commission that reflected the state's geographic and demographic makeup. Individual citizens were invited to apply using the Secretary of State website. In addition, the Secretary of State mailed applications to 10,000 randomly selected qualified voters who could apply using the redistrictingmichigan.org website. And after June 1st, a random process weighted to reflect geographic and demographic makeup of the state reduced the pool to 200, 60 self-identified Democrats, 60 self-identified Republicans, and 80 self-identified independents who could be members of minor parties or no party. And then looking at the bottom right side of the slide, the top 2 leaders in both the House and in the Senate could strike 5 strikes for a total of 20 that would reduce the final pool to 180 candidates. And then the final random selection produced the 13 commissioners. Next slide. Map approval. Next slide. Commissioners will spend a lot of time holding hearings and consulting with experts who use specialized software and data from many sources, including census data, to draw the election district maps. And the idea is to come up with election district maps that meet the criteria in the constitutional amendment and are approved by a strictly prescribed vote of the commissioners. Let's look and see how they will vote. The next slide, please. Oh, this is it. I'm sorry. Before a vote by the MICRC, the map must have been tested using appropriate technology to meet the criteria in the Constitution, which we'll cover in a bit. And approval requires a majority vote, meaning 7 of the 13 commissioners, which must include at least 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 2 independents or other. If these voting requirements cannot be met, each of the 13 commissioners would submit 1 final map for each state house, state senate, and US congressional district. The Secretary of State would choose from among these final maps. Next slide. The criteria and the rules. Next slide, please. The 7 criteria that must be met in order of priority are: 1, have equal population and comply with federal law, including the Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. Be geographically contiguous. Number 3, districts shall reflect the state's diverse population and communities of interest. Communities of interest may include, but shall not be limited to, populations that share cultural or historical characteristics or economic interests. Communities of interest do not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. There will be more about that in the next segment. 4th, districts may not give a disproportionate advantage to any political party. No packing or no cracking. This shall be determined using accepted measures of partisan fairness. Districts shall not favor or disfavor an incumbent or candidate. 6, shall consider county, city, or township boundaries. And 7, and last, districts shall be reasonably compact. Next, please. We heard a lot about hearings and from Commissioner Lett. As he said, there must be public hearings both before and after proposed maps are drawn. At least 10 public hearings in different geographic locations are required before drawing proposed maps. And at least 5 public hearings are required after proposed maps are drawn. Open meetings are required, and meetings must be accessible virtually and online. Input and transparency, and this is part about the public meetings, why it's so important. The public may also submit plans and underlying data and for consideration, which will also become part of the public record. And the commission must publish also plans and allow up to 45 days for public comment. And the commission and its staff, attorneys, and consultants may not discuss redistricting matters with the public outside of a public hearing, except if it has occurred in writing or at a previous public forum. And after a plan is adopted, the commission must publicize the plan and report explaining its decisions and materials used. This is essentially a list to correct the way that the maps were drawn in 2011. We will use these new maps in the 2022 election. And as Commissioner Lett mentioned, that some of the timing has changed due to the pandemic and delays in taking and producing the 2020 census information. And so it's been delayed. And as Commissioner Lett also explained, that the Constitution requirements at this rate cannot be fulfilled. So the commissioners have filed a petition with the Supreme Court to extend the final map approval date. And so now Valori will give more information about communities of interest. Valori?
Thanks, Liz. The Michigan League of Women Voters and its local affiliates have a role in this redistricting process. One of the most important things that the League is doing is to monitor the MICRC meetings to be sure that the law is followed. The League has frequently addressed the Commission to help answer questions that the Commission poses and expects to continue to do this during the process. In particular, the League is focusing of this is a new concept we've mentioned frequently in this meeting tonight. A new process, and it's part, or it's a new concept, and it's part of a new process for the state of Michigan. So public education is important. As part of our public education outreach, the League is collaborating with other groups in Michigan, such as Voters Not Politicians and the NAACP. Our goal is to identify communities of interest, connect with them, and support their participation in the redistricting process by assisting them with testimony and drawing maps of their communities to submit to the MICRC at the Commission's public hearings. Next slide, please. Now we're going to dig into that crucial topic of tonight's town hall. Just what are these communities of interest, and why are they so important to the process of drawing election district lines in Michigan? Remember, as Liz pointed out, Michigan's Constitution establishes a prioritized list of what the Commission is supposed to consider in drawing district boundaries. Only federal law and the contiguousness of districts are more important factors than communities of interest. So Michiganders need to know what this term communities of interest means. Next slide, please. Michigan's Constitution defines communities of interest, and that definition is pretty bare bones. Communities of interest are populations that share cultural characteristics, historical characteristics, and or economic interests. No further definition is provided. And although the Michigan Constitution doesn't include this in its definition of a community of interest, a COI must be able to identify its physical geographic boundaries so that it can be drawn on a map. This makes sense because the Commission needs to be able to actually see where COIs are located when it is taking into account the interests of all the various COIs that have self-identified. Next slide, please. Michigan is in an enviable position, having moved the job of creating election district lines from a gerrymandered legislature doing the work to an independent commission of voters. But this whole process is brand new and largely not known or understood by Michiganders. This is, after all, the first time in Michigan's history that this has been done. While several other states use some form of nonpartisan redistricting commission, Michigan's process is unique, and so we can't copy what other states do or use their definitions of communities of interest. To further complicate this process, and as has been said already, the crucial 2020 census was delayed by politics and the pandemic. Additionally, the public processes such as commission hearings are happening virtually rather than in person. All of this has added to the challenges. Next slide, please. Perhaps one of the best ways to help us understand what a community of interest is to offer some examples of communities of interest. And Commissioner Lett gave us some. it's important to remember that these are merely examples, and they do not in any way limit or exclude what a community of interest may be. So some of them are Hispanic or Latino populations, adjacent school districts with similar issues, agricultural groups such as dairy farmers or orchard growers, a group sharing a watershed or lakeshore, Native American tribes, neighborhood associations. All those are just examples. Recently, a group at the University of Michigan that is advising the commission convened a group of citizens to practice identifying communities of interest. And in just one session, over 1,000 potential COIs were identified. Again, other than the broad definition given in Michigan's Constitution, groups with shared cultural, historic, or economic interests, there is little guidance of what exactly constitutes a community of interest. Next slide, please. Community of interest matter because under Michigan's Constitution, they are meant to be the building blocks for legislative districts. And why is that? Finally, we get to the political theory behind Michigan's redistricting process. Generally speaking, the fundamental purpose is to group members of a COI in a single district, rather than scattering them or splitting them among 2 or more districts. Remember the concept in gerrymandering of cracking particular voters among several election districts to weaken their ability to elect a representative from that COI, and thus to weaken the voice of that community of interest. The same principle applies to grouping members of a COI together in a different context. It gives them the ability to have a stronger chance of electing and then influencing a lawmaker. Again, in thinking about these examples, note that each community of interest needs to be able to draw where it is located, its geographic boundaries on a map. And that is part of what communities of interest must provide as part of their testimony to the commission. The COI cannot be effectively taken into account if the commission does not know where that community of interest is located. Next slide, please. So how can you as an individual or as a member of a community of interest get involved in the redistricting process? The first way is to attend public hearings held by the MICRC. And as Commissioner Lett said earlier, the commission is holding 16 public hearings across the state, including one in the Upper Peninsula, which is scheduled for May 18th from 6 to 9 p.m. in Marquette. Right now, this public hearing is scheduled to be held both in person and via Zoom. A location has not yet been identified, but those who want to attend in person can find the location, or they can get the Zoom link on the MICRC webpage once those things are announced. And I don't believe that those, either the location or a link for those have actually been provided yet. Importantly, the commission has indicated that the public hearing will continue for as long as any person wishes to give testimony, even if the meeting goes past the scheduled 9 o'clock ending time. There may, however, be limits on how long any one person can speak. Michiganders need not, however, attend a public hearing in order to submit testimony to the MICRC. Residents can also submit testimony or comments via the MICRC online portal or by US mail. The links and the mailing address were given by Mr. Lett in one of his slides. All testimony, whether it's given in person, online, or by mail, will be given equal consideration by the commission. Finally, the League of Women Voters is here to help. For more information about communities of interest and how you can be involved, you can contact the Copper Country League of Women Voters. And remember that the town hall is being recorded and it will be accessible on the League's website. So you can just Google the Copper Country League of Women Voters and you'll be able to access that. The recording will include the PowerPoints from this presentation, including Commissioner Lett's PowerPoints. So you can get the websites, mailing addresses, and other contact information that has been mentioned this evening. So this concludes our presentation, and we are now available to take your questions. Thank you for your attendance.
I have a question. Is Michigan's House and Senate seats limited by law to 110 and 38 respectively, like the U.S. House of Representatives is limited to 435 seats? I'm done.
That's a good question, Bill, and I have to say that I don't know the answer to that. I do not know if it's limited to those numbers in the Constitution or if that's something that the legislature can change. I don't know. Does anybody
So
else?
The question comes, as population changes, if the number of districts have to remain the same, then the population that's in them will have to vary, right?
Well, and the number of districts currently would remain the same. And in the redistricting process, the shapes of those districts and the locations of those districts would change so that each district has approximately the same population base.
Mhm.
And that's how they were currently determined based on the 2010 census, and that's how they'll be determined again based on the 2020 census.
Mhm.
As I recall, when we moved here in 1990, I think we were in the 16th congressional district, and they finally figured out that the UP wasn't going anyplace. So they made us the first district with the idea we could eventually expand to encompass the whole state if it ever had to be that way.
Well,
Because,
the first district is the first congressional district, so that's federal.
yes,
We
that's
here
correct.
are, yeah, we here are in the 110th state House district and the 38th state Senate district.
But the practice in the federal system was all of the UP and Northern Lower kept getting assigned a different congressional district number as the population shrank. And they just finally did one common sense thing and said, let's call that the first district and we'll expand it forever if needed.
Mhm.
And it seems to be continue getting bigger and bigger
Yeah.
geographically.
Yeah.
If anyone would prefer to put a question in writing in the chat, you can do that and I'll read it out.
I had a question. I can just say it though. Well, first of all, thank you, Valerie and Elizabeth. That was really great and very informative. And you addressed my question I had from the beginning of what is this community of interest? So my next question is, it sounds like you have to be pretty proactive to have your voice heard in this process by showing up to the town halls and contacting the commission and things like that. And there's some room there for loudmouths to kind of push their agenda, maybe people who are connected to politicians. And I just wondered, is there something in there to really more proactively get the voices of the communities in defining themselves? Or at least some requirements that when you show up and you present a district that you actually live in that district? Like, you know what I'm saying? Are there some which this process maybe helps to give people in their own communities more voice and big mouths less?
Can I go ahead and address that question for Carrie, please?
Sure, go ahead.
So just as an example, the commission meets, they've been meeting at least twice a week for the last several months because they've had a lot of business to take care of. And the meetings that I have attended, they have a period of time at the beginning of the meeting where people who want to address the commission or ask questions are allowed to, live time. You're also allowed to submit comments or questions by email to the commission through their, it gets forwarded through their website. And I have to say that none of the commission meetings have been dominated by anybody. In fact, most of the meetings, no one actually speaks. Now, I'm sure a vast majority of people submit written comments and email comments, but very few testify or present comments or questions live. Now, what they're proposing to do to try to control the situation or the problems that you speak of is people will be time limited. You know, based on how many people that they're expecting to attend, because I think there's going to be probably a sign up similar to what we had here, so that you get an idea of how many people will be attending the meeting. And then they'll, you know, apportion time anywhere between 90 seconds and 5 minutes, depending on how many people they expect to show up to the hearings. I'm not certain whether there are going to be groups of people that are going to try to be busing people from out of state to disrupt these types of meetings. I'm not, and I don't see anything in place yet that they're going to be controlling the number of people that will be admitted to the meetings in live, but they will be time constrained. So people can't go on rants and dominate the time. Now, people who are serious and want to participate, they are still allowed to participate in writing. They can present testimony in writing. They can present their own maps. They can present their ideas on community of interest. Groups can get together and say, we are a community of interest. This is the map. This is the physical boundaries of who we think our community of interest represents. And that is admitted into the record and is just as much a part of the record as people who attend the live meetings and give live testimony. And they are weighted exactly the same. There's no disproportionate balance of, okay, well, you bothered to show up, so we're going to give you more credit to what you have to say than to people who want to submit things in writing. Everything is still in the public record. I hope that answers your question.
I would add one other thing to what you just said, Elizabeth, and that is that, you know, your observation to the questioner that it does require that groups or that communities of interest be proactive. The MICRC is not itself going to identify communities of interest. So if people want to be heard, they need to show up, whether that is at a public hearing or whether it's submitting testimony in writing or online. So that part is still incumbent upon the communities of interest to self-identify. Barry, any more questions?
I don't
Were we
think,
able to answer your question, Carrie?
Yeah, that's all very helpful. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a pretty open process. You know, I guess I wonder if, you know, you've talked about buses coming over state lines, you know, is it just open to anyone? Is it open to only residents of Michigan to comment? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Well, I don't think there's any restriction on who it is that can speak, but certainly they have to have and the community of interest is limited to a community that exists in Michigan. So if a group chooses that they want to have somebody that happens to be out of state come and speak for them, I don't think there's any restriction on that. Here in the Upper Peninsula, I honestly don't think that at the meeting in Marquette that that's going to be likely to be a serious problem for us. Downstate, it may be, but I don't think that it will be here.
In addition to the large group meetings, the 16 meetings that they have scheduled around the state where all of the commissioners are required to attend, they're going to be doing a series of town halls all across the state too. And in fact, they have 6 universities identified where they're going to do presentations to the universities to engage young people and get them understanding what the process is. And 5 out of the 6 universities are in rural areas, which I thought was really a great idea, because universities are a great way of having communities come in as well, and then getting younger people engaged, because in 10 years from now, we're going to be doing the same thing all over again. We need to keep young people engaged in the process and keep them informed so that we can keep the bloodline going, if you will. So, there's going to be a number of opportunities for people in local areas to be able to participate, hopefully without a lot of outside interference.
I have a question on a separate subject. I was wondering if anyone knows in the redistricting commission's preliminary work so far, have they been working under the assumption that Michigan will end up having 13 US congressional districts?
Well, that's in the public record, if you will. There have been a number of articles published on that particular topic. They are in the process of getting used to using the tools to draw maps, and they're doing some practice stuff. But until they have data to actually work with, they're not doing any work with the state of Michigan. They're doing practice runs using other states, if you will.
But it sounded like they were going to do some practice runs with Michigan
Yes,
data.
they are, but they haven't yet to date.
And I doubt that they will actually start using any of that other data until after September 30th, which would be the time that, or when they actually think that they're should have had the actual census data. Because until they have that data available to, I don't think that they can actually make the assumption that they're going to lose a congressional seat, even though realistically everybody thinks that they will. I don't think that they're going to go on that assumption. I think they're going to be focused for the time being right now, coming up in May, doing all of these town hall or public hearings and collecting data and getting that input.
Who actually makes that determination of who
Which
gets which seat,
determination?
of who gets which seats? Is
That's
it the
done at-
Census Bureau, or is it?
Yeah, that's done at a federal level.
I know, but I was wondering who, or what agency actually does that? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure.
Census.
Is it the Census Bureau?
Yeah. And
Okay.
the problem is that they have been delayed in
Right,
publishing
right.
their data.
Yeah, I knew it was the census data, but I didn't know who.
That's
Actually-
actually a really good question, because I really don't know which,
Yeah.
is it the US House of Representatives themselves? Is there a special commission? Does it go to the Legislative Commission or caucus or
Right.
committee? I should say the Legislative Committee. I don't know. That's a really good question.
Responsible for constructing its own within the limits. Now, what this will mean going from 14 to 13 is that one member of Congress someplace is going to lose a seat. And that's going to have to be worked through.
Can I volunteer people? A person? Oh, sorry.
We wish. You know, I suspect for us and the first, it's going to be a matter of adding 3 or 4 more counties at the southern tier of the district. It's about all that can happen.
Well, I think that brings us to the conclusion of tonight's program. Thanks everybody for participating. And the recorded program will be on the website, as we've heard. So if you want to refer back to it or send anybody else to have a look, they can see it there. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Barry, for running the slides, and please tell Michael thank you for us for getting all the technical glitches worked out. And thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you.
Very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.